I thought it was just my neighbor returning a dish until I opened the door and saw the look in his eyes. What he asked for left me trembling, not from fear, but from something I hadn't felt in years. I'm Marlene, 57, and what happened that night changed everything I believed about love, timing, and second chances. Hi everyone, I'm Jessica, the storyteller on the Adult Women's Tales channel. Here, I'll share stories about love, conflicts, betrayal, and infidelity within American families. These stories offer a deep look into relationships and the challenges families face. Stay tuned and explore with me. If you love emotional stories and want to uncover the hidden secrets in families, don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our videos. Marlene here. At 57, I've embraced simplicity throughout my life. I tied the knot early, nurtured 2 wonderful children, and enriched my days with gardening, lending a hand at the library, and enjoying coffee chats with my neighbors. Drama was never on my radar, and I certainly never envisioned that love or longing would come knocking at my door once more after all this time, especially not in such a way. I thought that chapter of my life had ended long ago. Then an unexpected event unfolded, one that remains beyond my complete understanding. I never imagined that something like this would happen to me. I urge you to avoid the misstep I experienced. The knock echoed through the early evening air, drawing my attention. I had just wrapped up tidying the kitchen, still humming along to the tune playing on the radio, when I thought it might be Diane returning for her baking dish. She and her husband Peter joined us for dinner the previous night, a cherished neighborhood tradition we've maintained throughout the years. However, when I swung the door open, it wasn't Diane who greeted me. It was Peter, by oneself. His eyes were swollen and crimson, the type of crimson that arises not from sleepless nights, but from an exhausting, heart-wrenching weep. The sharp scent of whiskey wafted from his breath, a prelude to his words. Marlene, I found myself at a loss for where to turn. That behavior was uncharacteristic of him. Peter was the type of man who always had a joke at the ready, the kind who greeted you from across the street as if you were part of his family. Witnessing him in that state, unsteady and vulnerable, sent a chilling shiver down my spine. I swung the door open wider, lost in the moment. Step right in. He entered and lingered uncertainly in the center of my living room, caught between the urge to take a seat or make a hasty exit. I shut the door behind him and paused, anticipation hanging in the air. Breaking the silence, he finally spoke. She left. I blinked. Diane. He nodded, his throat tightening as he swallowed. She filled her bag this morning, announcing her plans to visit her sister in Arizona. Is it her? She mentioned that she requires some time. My heart plummeted. I was completely unaware that they were facing difficulties. They had always appeared so steadfast, transcending the role of mere neighbors. They shared a bond of friendship, a love that feels cozy and brings joy with every laugh. Would you like to take a seat? I suggested softly. Peter nodded and settled onto the edge of my couch as if wary of being consumed by it. I took a seat across from him in the armchair, pulling my cardigan a bit closer around me. He clasped his hands together, a gesture filled with anticipation. I apologize for arriving unexpectedly. I felt like I had no one else to turn to. It's perfectly fine, I assured, and I truly meant it. Yet there was an additional feeling that stirred within me. An unusual constricting sensation in my chest. The atmosphere was thick with weight. What did she say? She mentioned that she has felt unhappy for years, Peter continued, his voice strained. I've been overwhelmed and somewhat disengaged. I'm uncertain. I believed everything was okay between us. I scanned his expression, uncertain of how to respond. I understood the sensation of a gradual drift. My marriage concluded quietly as well, devoid of shouting or the sound of slammed doors, only emptiness. A journey that begins with the simple omission of a good night and culminates in two lives living apart, yet under the same roof. He gazed at me then, his eyes gentle yet empty. Have you ever sensed that you overlooked your moment to shine? It feels as though there was a moment when you were meant to speak or act differently, yet you held back, and now it's gone for good. I nodded thoughtfully, more often than I care to acknowledge. Peter leaned in, resting his elbows on his knees. I find myself reflecting on those fleeting moments as if they were bright lights I chose to overlook. She always seemed like a constant presence. Silence enveloped the room once more. In the gentle embrace of dusk, a wind chime softly jingled, its notes dancing with the breeze. Time seemed to stand still as we sat there, each lost in thought about our lives and the paths we chose not to follow. A change stirred within that silence, an unexpected intimacy. The heaviness of his sorrow intertwined with an unvoiced emotion, creating a palpable tension in the air. I got up gradually. Allow me to prepare a delightful cup of tea for you. He remained silent, merely nodding, his gaze locked on the floor as if he feared it would reveal his secrets. As I filled the kettle in the kitchen, my hands quivered with anticipation. I found myself uncertain about the reason. Perhaps it was the closeness of the moment, or maybe it was the realization that, for the first time in ages, I was no longer viewing Peter merely as my neighbor's spouse. I perceived him as a man. I was unprepared for the emotions that it awakened within me. I entered the living room, carrying the tea, and set his cup down on the coffee table with a soft clink. The gentle steam danced around us, intertwining with the stillness. Peter glanced upward, offering a subtle smile, weary yet appreciative. "Thank you," he murmured gently. I settled into the armchair, cradling my mug in my hands, allowing the warmth to anchor me in the moment. The room was now enveloped in a soft dimness, illuminated solely by the warm orange glow of the lamp at my side. The rest of the world seemed distant. He savored a sip, then reclined with a deep, measured exhale. "How peculiar," he whispered. After years of sharing your life with someone, their absence can transform your home into a space that feels foreign, as if it no longer belongs to you. I observed him intently. "Have you had a conversation with anyone else? Is it a friend? How about your brother?" He gave a slight shake of his head. "I just couldn't do it. There's something unique about our connection." That caused a tightness in my chest. I chose not to inquire about his meaning. I found myself uncertain about whether I truly wanted to find out. Not at this moment. Grief has a way of drawing people toward comfort and connection. There was an undeniable thrill in being truly seen, as if you were teetering on the brink of something both perilous and exhilarating. Peter placed his mug on the table and surveyed the room. "It seems like not much has shifted in here since Dan left us, right?" I blinked. The name struck with more impact than I anticipated. It had been nearly 9 years since Dan had left. It often seemed like it was only yesterday when he playfully teased me about my ferns that were a bit too watered. At times, it seemed like an entirely different existence. "No," I replied softly. I found myself unable to do so. Peter nodded as if he grasped the concept. "You always appeared so serene, as if you had come to terms with everything." I certainly did. I spoke, though my tone lacked the conviction I hoped to convey, even to myself. At long last, yet there are still moments when I enter a room and anticipate his presence. Evenings when I effortlessly set 2 places for dinner. His gaze softened as he glanced down at his hands. "I've been keeping an eye on you for years, you know. Not in an unusual manner, simply observing. You consistently presented yourself as if you had discovered tranquility following the chaos. It instilled a sense of hope within me. I found myself at a loss for words in response to that." Compliments for men have lost their authenticity for quite some time now. However, this experience was unlike any other. It transcended mere looks or charisma. It was more profound, something that pierced through the layers I attempted to conceal. The silence enveloped us once more, but this time it crackled with unexpressed emotions, heavy and palpable. Peter took a moment to clear his throat. It might be time for me to head out. I never intended to linger this long. I accompanied him, guiding him to the door. He stepped onto the porch, then paused and turned to face me. His expression appeared conflicted, as if he were grappling with an inner struggle. Marlene. He started, then hesitated. His jaw clenched. I patiently waited. He finally expressed, "Last night, after dinner, I experienced this moment, watching you laugh and listening to your stories. I came to a realization. It's been ages since I've experienced such a sense of ease." I parted my lips only to seal them shut again. My heart pounded against my ribs, each beat echoing in a way that felt almost deafening. He offered a soft smile, his eyes glimmering with a tender warmth. I apologize if that was inappropriate. I simply had to express it. As I joined him on the porch, the cool night air caressed my arms. "It's not out of line," I murmured softly. "It's genuine." We remained still, untouched and unmoving, simply gazing at one another. He nodded, descended the porch steps, and made his way across the lawn toward the shadowy outline of his house. I kept my gaze fixed on him until his figure disappeared behind the door. In that moment, I lingered, my heart pounding, caught in a whirlwind of uncertainty. I couldn't pinpoint the exact line that had been crossed, yet I felt an undeniable shift in the dynamic between us. I found myself questioning whether I could ever return to the facade of ignorance. The following morning, the light appeared transformed. The light slipped through my kitchen blinds in gentle, dreamy stripes, as if the world were caught in a delicate balance between shadow and sun. As I gently stirred my coffee, my gaze drifted to the backyard, where the breeze danced through the worn fabric of the patio umbrella. The very backyard where Peter and Diane once celebrated summer barbecues, where laughter flowed over fences like a sweet melody. Yet now, the atmosphere seemed overly calm, almost charged with anticipation. I didn't get a good night's sleep. I found myself replaying Peter's words repeatedly, much like a scratched record stuck on a loop. The scene on the porch replayed in my thoughts endlessly. His gaze was intense, not the casual glance of a neighbor, but rather that of a man who had been concealing something genuine for far too long. I ought to have experienced guilt. Perhaps I did, just a tad. Diane still hadn't initiated the divorce proceedings. She was not lost for eternity. She was simply absent for the moment. Yet guilt wasn't the most dominant thought in my mind. It was truly remarkable. Inquisitiveness. Isolation. Indeed, a gentle feeling that I hadn't summoned the courage to acknowledge in years. By midday, I was in the backyard, diligently pulling weeds from the flower bed's edge, when I heard a sound. I looked up, and there he was again. Peter stood just beyond, cradling a small cardboard box in his hands. "Good morning," I shouted, wiping the dirt from my gloves. "I discovered this in the attic. Some are holding gardening books. I thought you could benefit from them more than I could." He raised the box a bit, almost as if to validate his presence. Yet we both understood that the true essence lay beyond the pages. A smile spread across my face. "Absolutely. Have him come over." Moments later, he found himself back on my porch, reminiscent of the previous night. This time, the burden on his shoulders felt noticeably lighter. I welcomed him inside, and we settled at the kitchen table, sifting through the dusty books, feigning interest in our true purpose for being there. "How are you doing today?" I inquired. He let out a breath. Improved. Expressing it verbally seemed to make a difference. In this moment, a pause lingered in the air. "Apologies if I overstepped yesterday," he said thoughtfully, his gaze locked onto mine. "I aim to keep things simple for you. I mentioned that you didn't." After a moment, Perhaps things were already tangled before we even spoke. He offered a slight nod. I honestly didn't anticipate feeling this kind of connection with someone again. Not at this moment. This isn't the way. As I gazed at my hands, my thumb glided along the edge of my mug. I feel the same way. We found ourselves in a moment, balancing on the brink of an undefined experience that left us both uncertain. The guidelines shifted, yet the blueprint remained unwritten. In a gentle moment, he extended his hand and softly made contact with mine. It was neither a grab nor a demand, simply a gesture. Cozy, authentic, consistent. I paused for a moment, not from fear, but from a sense of wonder at how long it had been since anyone had touched me without any strings attached, simply being there. He expressed a longing for the presence of someone who truly listens, who is watching me. His voice wavered slightly on that final word. I gazed up at him, and for the first time, he was no longer just Diane's husband. I spotted Peter, a man simultaneously coming apart and reconstructing himself. A warmth blossomed within me in response. "I caught a glimpse of you," I murmured. He held back. He kept his distance. He sat beside me, his hand covering mine, as we both embraced the delicate silence that felt too precious to disturb. At last, the clock in the living room chimed. He cast a fleeting look in its direction and rose gradually to his feet. "I need to leave," he stated. "It seems I have a few things to sort out." I escorted him to the door once more, my heart weighed down, yet curiously buoyant all at once. Just before he stepped out, he glanced back at me one final time. "Is it all right if I stop by again, simply to converse?" I gave a nod. "Absolutely." He departed, and I remained at the door, my hand resting on the frame, absorbing the warmth of his presence that still lingered in the air. A new chapter was unfolding. Even without a name for it, I felt, deep down, that we had both ventured into uncharted territory. Prudent, not prohibited, simply unexplored. In that moment, fear faded away, and I embraced the journey ahead. The days that came after were serene, yet filled with substance. Peter didn't stop by daily. Occasionally, it was merely a wave from across the yard, a subtle nod as our paths intersected at the mailbox. When he finally arrived, we settled in for a conversation concerning the absence of anything, concerning all aspects, reflecting on cherished childhood memories, beloved meals, and unfinished books we both hold dear. Moments that seemed insignificant back then, yet created an atmosphere of warmth and safety between us. He never pushed, I didn't inquire. We simply occupied the same space. As the evening settled and the sky embraced twilight, a familiar knock echoed through the stillness once more. As I swung the door open, I noticed he wasn't carrying any books or items in his hands. He appeared serene, yet a hidden intensity flickered in his gaze, a form of determination. "May I enter?" he inquired. I quietly moved aside, allowing him to go by. He lingered in my living room, hands tucked into his pockets, surveying the space as if it were entirely new to him. "Diane called," he finally said. "She is eager to have a conversation. Let's plan to meet up next week. However, I believe it's merely to formalize the situation." A peculiar blend of sadness and insight washed over me. I chose not to celebrate it. I also didn't mourn it. I just received the news. "I truly apologize," I said. And I meant it. Not only for him, but for the lost connection between them, for what could never be fully mended. He gave a nod. I expected to feel more shattered. However, the reality is that being here and engaging in this conversation has allowed me to confront certain truths I had long avoided. He inhaled deeply, then made his way to the window, gazing out at the yard as it succumbed to the encroaching darkness. Have you ever considered that some individuals enter our lives not to remain, but to remind us of something we've lost sight of within ourselves? I mentioned it softly, time and again. He pivoted to meet my gaze. Marlene, I'm not quite sure what this is all about. I'm not quite sure what it all signifies just yet, but being with you feels genuine and straightforward, even amidst the complexities. You bring me back to my humanity, reminding me that I can still experience something genuine. My throat constricted. As I gazed at him, truly gazed, a revelation struck me, one I had never allowed myself to embrace. He didn't request a promise from me. He didn't seek my approval. He was presenting authenticity. I'm not in search of a substitute, I stated, moving in closer. I'm not looking for answers. Yet I understand the sensation of sharing a space with someone and feeling a sense of connection that banishes loneliness. He remained silent. Once more, he extended that familiar, subtle gesture, his hand effortlessly finding mine. This time, I took action without a moment's pause. We settled on the couch, not engulfed in passion, not lost in confusion, simply sitting together, close, present, and safe. The cicadas buzzed in the warm evening air. A gentle breeze wafted through the open window, bringing with it the sweet fragrance of lilac. I nestled against his shoulder while he gently rested his cheek atop my head. After years of anticipation and loss, I finally felt a sense of presence, free from the weight of waiting for something to start or mourning what had passed. I simply felt it here. As he departed that evening, he pressed a gentle kiss to my cheek, just once, but it held a depth of meaning. As I stood at the door, observing him fade into the darkness, I felt a sense of calm that I hadn't experienced before. I experienced a sense of stillness. I felt acknowledged. I experienced a surge of vitality. Perhaps this has been the underlying essence all along, neither a start nor a finish. However, a comeback, for my own reflection, up to now, to something genuine. That's it for today's story. If you found it moving, don't forget to share the video with your friends and family. I'd love to hear your thoughts, so leave a comment below. Be sure to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Have a great day.